Hello everyone, welcome to the video. In this session, we are going to discuss the first writing test. So hope you have taken the test. We'll start discussing the questions now. This was the first passage we had, which was about mechanization. Give it a quick read. So I hope you have done that because you have taken the test. After this, we'll go to each and every question one by one. You can see these parts are underlined, so by now you should be aware of this, that this is the first part, this is the second part, and this is the third part, which means question number 1, 2, and 3 are based on this first passage. So let's get started. As you can see, this is about mechanization. This is the first part. As a first step, so let's come back and we'll start with the question. So this is the first question, right? So first thing we are going to do on all the questions is we'll look at the answer choices. Right? So we'll look at the answer choices and try to identify an error. And how would we identify an error? We'll identify it based on the point of differences in the answer choices. So we are looking at the answer choices for these differences, the point of difference. If we look at this, we find that, okay, the punctuations are changing. Now this gives us a way to identify the error. That means there is something wrong with the punctuations. Now we'll go to the passage. Right, and reread the part which is underlined. Once we read that, we'll come back to this and apply process of elimination. That means we will start with the wrong choices, so we are left with the correct one, right? So we'll apply the process of elimination after reading. So let's get started. Look at this. Now don't just read the underlined part, we have to read this whole line. And because I assume that you have already read this, so you would know that what the overall theme is. So let's look at this. It says many factory workers in the 19th century thought their jobs were safe, but we know now that they were wrong. So look at this. First part says that they thought their jobs were safe. Then we have this conjunction, but we know now that they were wrong. So first question is dealing with contrast, where you have the first part. They thought they were safe, so that's the X part. Then we have a contradiction expressed with this conjunction but, and then the Y part comes, that they were wrong. They thought they were safe, but they were wrong. Now, as you can see, we need a but after that, there is a whole clause that is coming. We have a subject, we have a verb. And whenever that happens, when we use a conjunction to join two complete, or we can say two independent clauses or sentences, then we need this comma, right? And we know that our question is about punctuation. So let's see which answer choice matches this structure. So we go back here. The first one didn't have a comma. We can see this again, no comma here. This one goes out. Then we have they were safe, but we know, so we have a comma. B looks good. Were safe, then we have a semicolon. Now when do we use semicolon? When we have two independent clauses. Independent clauses means sentences, right? For example, we had here. They thought they were safe, but they were wrong. I called her, but she didn't pick, right? So in this case, we had a but. But what if we want to join these two independent clauses without a conjunction? Then how would we write it? For example, I called her, but she didn't pick. Now note, in this case, we have a contrast, right? Now, when we don't have a contrast, right? For example, I called her and I want to say she's coming. Now note, this part is independent and this is also independent. We can join two independent clauses with a semicolon or a full stop, right? But when we have a contradiction, then we need these conjunctions. So let's come back. This has semicolon, that means this is wrong. This has a full stop, this goes out. B is our answer, right? So X part, comma part, and Y part. Let's look at next question now. Look at the answer choices. Try to take some hints with what words are changing. So what words are changing? You can see a pronoun is changing. So we got our first hint that it has to be related to, or error has to be related to pronoun. And then we see this part is changing. Today's, today's, and today's. If we look at this, from here itself we get today. Today means whatever the day is, today, right? And today's, there is no plural to that, right? So this part is wrong. So we automatically see that this part is wrong because we want to say today's world, the world that belongs to today, right? So automatically we see B and C have this error. Then we are saying world believes their jobs. That means jobs that they belong to these people, right? The jobs which belong to these people. Whereas here we have they are. They are is just a compact form of they are, right? Same thing here. So if we go back, let's reread this whole part. It says many people in today's world, so this part is fine here, believe their job are safe, but here this there is wrong. Now what is this there? Here opposite of that is there. So let's look at this part here. So here we have there, which means you're pointing, for example, I'm saying there, that place, right? No, we are not talking about that. We are talking about possession, something which belongs to this group of people, right? In this case, their jobs. This goes out, these two, so they are, right? This part also goes out. Today's, just like here, we want to show possession in today's world, so this part is fine. Today's is wrong here. D is the answer. Good with this? Let's move to the next question. Now look at the third one. We have better at, say, welding, better at, say, welding, better at, say. So what is happening here? We are saying better at, and say is used here to give example. Right? For example, let's go somewhere, say Starbucks, right? So we're just giving one option that, okay, let's go there, right? Or she was looking at, or she's looking out, let's say she's looking for something, right? So I can say she's looking for, say, maybe a craft piece, right? So I'm just giving an example of what she's looking at. Now, this part, if we see, is just adding that this is the example will come. Now see, when we write a sentence, there are main parts to it and there are descriptions. For example, if I say, Mr. John who lives across the street is my class teacher. In this case, rather using one word, I have used this whole line to describe Mr. John. But the main thing I want to tell you is that Mr. John is my class teacher. Right? This part is just a description. When we read this, this is our main part. Mr. John is my class teacher is the main part, whereas this part is just a description which is giving us more information on Mr. John. Now, though, note, if we see the structure, how the structure is, we have the subject, then the description is coming, right? And then we have the rest of the part, the predicate part. Predicate means whatever you have the verb and if you have any object, right? Now, as per rule, this description should start with a comma and end with a comma, or it should start with a dash or end with a dash, right? Or sometimes we can put description in two brackets, right? So starting bracket, ending, starting dash, ending dash, starting bracket, ending bracket. We can't have something like missing one part and having the other, right? So let's look at this. What do we have here? So here, the first option, let's look at the part which is given to us. So it says better, then we don't have, we want to say better at. Now note, if I remove this say here, it is a complete sentence. A machine is obviously better at welding huge pieces, right? So now we know that, okay, this part was just saying the description. Problem with this part, by now you should see, closing comma is there, but there is no opening comma. That means this part makes a syntax error. So A goes out. Let's look at B. B has opening comma, but no closing comma. This has opening as well as closing. That means we can, if we remove this, a sentence reads out properly. This looks good. Here we don't have any comma. Goes out. When we can skip commas? When this information is something which is very essential, right? For example, the students who have ID cards can enter. Now you can see, if you ask what kind of students can enter, you have the students who have ID cards. If you notice, this part is also a description, right? But is it a description that we can get rid of? Not really. Because if we get rid of this, then the sentence would read out as the students can enter. That means all the students can enter. That changes the meaning, right? So in this case, we can't have commas because this part, this description is an essential description. Whereas here, this was not essential. The sentence was making perfect sense without it. So here, C is our answer. Now, let's look at passage 2. This talks about questions being pessimist or overly optimist, and then studies which are remarkable, and then we are talking about a program which is primarily used. Right? So let's look at the first part. This comes under a bracket. You can see inside a bracket. Talks about it seems overly pessimist, and you're giving the second idea that either pessimist or optimist, depending upon your point of view. And then we have a semicolon here. And then we have, however, some research studies have been duly remarkable. So again, if we see the structure, the questions may seem overly pessimist. That's the first part. Then we have a semicolon. Then we have however and a comma. And then the why part is coming, right? Which is some recent studies have been duly remarkable, right? In this case now, what is the rule? When we have just discussed a conjunction but, right? In the previous question, we had X, but Y, right? So here we had X, the independent part, then we comma and but and the second part, right? But in the case of however, the punctuations work differently. Here, when we have complete the first part, before the next part, which is also complete, we need to have a semicolon, right? Or sometimes a full stop, which suggests that, okay, this part is complete, right? This is the first part. However, now this is the second part which is coming, right? So now we want a semicolon, which is actually given here. So this part is good. And we also are given a comma after however, right? Again, showing contrast. So this part looks good. Answer choice A. Let's go back here, right? So first part looks good. Now let's see. So here you can see there is a comma. We want either a semicolon, right? Or a full stop. So that is not working. If we look at the options, what kind of errors we have? Your versus you are. We have just done a similar question where we had their versus they are, right? So we just saw that they are is just a compact form of they are. Similarly, you are is a compact form and this is the expanded form, you are. What are we talking about? Your point of view. That means point of view belongs to this person. This belongs to you, your point of view, right? That means you are is wrong. These two options go out, right? Here we have identified a punctuation error. This also goes out. We are left with C. That's a correct answer. Rules we saw, belongingness. So here we want a word which shows belongingness, right? Something belongs to something. And syntax, punctuations. Let's go back. Question number 5. Let's look at the options. We have depression, then second item, and the third item. So this seems like a list. And with this rule, so list takes us to the rule parallelism, right? So we have seen that parallelism tests list. So what do? A perfect list. Here we see 3 items. So A, comma B, comma and C. So this is the structure. If we have 4 items, A, comma B, comma C and D. Note that this comma which is coming before and is not optional. This is mandatory. You have to have it. When can we skip this comma? We were talking about 2 things like A and B. Then it's fine. Then we don't need a comma, right? So now let's look at the first list we have here. Patients with depression, PTSD, comma, right? We want a comma here, which is not given in the first part. So let's look at the question here. First part goes out. The comma before and is missing, right? Let's look at this part. Depression, PTSD, and so we have the first comma, A, comma, B, comma, and C. This looks perfect. A, comma, B, comma, and comma. We have this extra comma. We don't need this, right? Comma and, so when we have comma and C should come directly. So there is an extra comma here. A, comma, B, comma, C, other and no. We don't need a comma towards the end of the list, right? This goes out. B is our answer. This is called, the rule is called list parallelism. There was Only one rule tested here. Let's look at next question. So here we have to a real person, comma, then we have a semicolon but, right, which is wrong. We have just seen that comma and but should come. To a real person, and we don't have any punctuation. So again, it seems like it is testing us for syntax. Let's read the full line. So here we are saying many patients found it easier to talk to Ellie than to a real person. Now see, here we have parallelism going here. Found it easier to talk to X than to Y. This part looks okay. And then we have a colon. Now, colon is used when you are either expanding on the first part, either you are giving some sort of a list after that, or you are giving some sort of an emphasis, right? So here, Ellie, that to a real person. Then we have colon. She didn't react. So first part tells us why people find it easier to talk to Ellie, right, which is a computer program. Because this part tells us, it expands on it, that she didn't react in some of those seemingly judgmental ways that a person would, and her voice. So till here, and her voice never broke. This is the second part. So let's go through the first one. So here we saw that we have colon, which looks fine because second part is expanding on the first. Let's scroll down. So question number 6, let's open it here. So here this part is okay. Now let's look at some examples here. So example to give some sort of a emphasis. How do we use that? Let's say he found his passion traveling. What I'm saying, what his passion is? Passion is traveling. This is how colon is used to give some sort of a emphasis, right? I want, let's say, to specialize in some skills, right? And then you can name the skills. Let's say English speaking, you can say grammar, and this. So in this case, colon is used to identify or list, present a list. The third one, which we are using here, which is once you use it to expand on the first part. So here, the second part expands or elaborate, right, on the first. Okay, so here, why it's easier to talk to Ellie? Because of this reason. So that part is clear. Here, we have a comma. Now note, when we use comma, then basically we are joining two complete clauses with a comma. Note, many people found it easier to talk to Ellie than to a real person. Complete. She didn't react in some of those. That means we are joining two independent clauses, or you can say two sentences with a comma. The error is called comma splice, which means you are joining two parts with a comma which cannot be joined. We need to either have a semicolon here or a full stop, right? We cannot join two complete sentences with a comma. Goes out to a real person, but this we have already identified. If we need to use but, right, we need a comma. And more than that, we need to have some sort of contradiction, right? Do we have a contradiction here? People like to talk to Ellie, and the second part elaborates that, okay, why is that? Because she's not judgmental, right? So there is no contrast here. goes out. To a real person, she. Now look at this. It's very close to be. The only difference is we have a comma here. Here we don't have comma. Such sentences are called run-on. Why run-on? They are running onto each other, right? First part is there and then suddenly the second part starts. They are just running into each other. We need a barrier here because this part is complete, right? So either if we are just talking about two independent sentences, we need a semicolon or a full stop. In this case, because the second one is elaborating on the first, we need a colon. Goes out. C is the answer. Okay, so let's go to next question. Here we have, let's look at the choices. Never broke, on top of that, never broke, and then we are completing this part. Never broke, completing this part, on top, and comma. So this looks very weird. You can just see that, right? We have not even started, but this looks weird. On top and then comma, of what, comma. Look at this. When can we use such parts? When something is incomplete, right? Never broke, on top of that, and something is continuing. So this will use when this is incomplete, this is coming inside as a description and the sentence is continuing. This we will use when the first part is complete and the second part is starting. Note, full stop. That means this is going to be a new part. Third one, last one, never broke, semicolon. Then we have on top of that. Here we are breaking this. So this is all automatically looks like a very bad option. So let's go back and see what we are talking about here. And in this case, you have to go back and read this whole line. So don't just read this part, but because we need to know the whole context, we need to read this whole thing. So we're starting from this part. We have already read this. To a real person, she didn't react in some of those seemingly way. We have done that. And so see this part with and we are starting a new thing. And her voice never broke, on top of that. And her voice never broke. This is a one complete thing. On top of that, she could help psychologists to diagnose mental illness better than humans could. Right? So this part is complete. Look at this. Her voice never broke. And then we are starting that. On top of that, what happened? So let's go back. Right. So here in A, we don't have any barrier. We need this part because this part is complete, right? We need either semicolon or a full stop because this is complete. And then we are saying on top of that, this is a new thing, right? So A goes out. B says never broke. This part is complete. And then we have, if we choose this, so see this, it's a complete part. Whatever that is coming after that is also complete. And if we use this, a description in middle, that means so comma to comma means this is not essential. If we remove that, then again we have a run-on sentence, a complete sentence running into another complete sentence. Goes out. Down to these two, we get full stop here. That means this part is complete. And then we are starting another sentence that, okay, on top of that, this is a new thing. Now this is fine, right? One thing is complete. On top of that, the next complete thing comes. This looks good. As we discussed, this semicolon is fine, but then we are breaking this idiomatic expression, right? We are saying on top and then we are saying of that. Then in that case, on of what? So this leads to an ambiguity. Because we are breaking it. Here it's very clear on top of that. Here this is wrong. C is the answer. New passage now, passage 3. Again we are discussing Ellie, right? Whether Ellie is the way of the future is yet to be determined. We can't know right now. So here we're talking about, let's read this part. There is no question that she raises some interesting questions, not only about the work of psychologists. So let's look at this. Here we're talking about the work of psychologists. Issue is, why do we have this apostrophe, right? What are the right ways? Either I want to say that the work of psychologist. That means the work that belongs to these people. Or we want to say that if the work belongs to all of them, then we'll say psychologists' work. Note, when we make something plural, when we show possession on a plural, we don't use another S, right? So we don't say that books, pages, we don't say that. So this is wrong, right? We don't need another S. So if you want to show belongingness, we'll use the plural form and just add an apostrophe, just like I have added here. Psychologists, apostrophe, work. Okay, so A goes out because it gives us an apostrophe here also. In other words, it shows possession here also, work of psychologists. So we know, okay, this belongs to them. It also adds an apostrophe, again showing possession. Such constructions are called redundant. So here we are discussing redundancy. A goes out. Here it says psychologist work. What is the problem here? We don't have an apostrophe. That how do we know this is their work? Right? It's just placing the two words together. Goes out. The work of psychologists. So this looks good. Shows belongingness. The work of psychologists. Now again, see the work of. We already know this belongs to them, and it also adds an apostrophe towards the end. So again being redundant, like same issue here. Also now it changes the meaning and uses that, okay, it's only one psychologist we are talking about. So redundancy and meaning. We are using two possessions, the work of and here also psychologists. That means something that belongs to psychologist. Note, either I can say if I'm saying Rahul's pen, right? That means the pen that belongs to Rahul, or pen of Rahul, which sounds a little awkward, but this is correct. Pen of Rahul. But what is D and A are doing? Saying pen of Rahul's, right? This is wrong. We are showing possession here also and then here also. Okay, let's move to question number 9. Task those learned before the age of about 10. So it's talking about task, what kind of task. So this part is a description, right? So we have task, some description, and then it's continuing, right? Note, we have a closing comma, not opening, so this seems to be a problem. Opening is there, closing is not there, seems to be a problem. Opening is there, closing is there. D looks like a good answer. Let's go back and confirm our understanding. Here we're talking about in some of the most basic tasks. So look at this. In some of these, that means this part itself is describing something. In some of the most basic tasks, what happens? Humans have a huge upper hand, right? That is the main tense. So if I have to underline, this part is the main tense. In some of the most basic tasks, this part is the previous description, which is describing this whole part, that humans have upper hand, right? In some of the basic tasks. And this part is just telling us what kind of tasks. Those learned before the age of about 10, these kind of tasks. That means this description has to be placed within 2 brackets, 2 dashes or 2 commas. Let's look at this. What do we have? We have already looked at the options. So the first one, here when we see, we don't have any comma, right? And this is not something which is very essential, right? So this goes out because we are just telling more about the task. Opening comma missing, closing comma missing. We have both opening and closing comma. D is the answer. The rule testing us for syntax. The question testing us for syntax. Here what do we have? Can tell your washer and dryer. Can tell you are washer. So note this. Automatically we get to see that you are. We are not saying you are washer because you are saying you can tell these people, right? You can tell your washer and dryer what to be done, right? So you can tell you are washer. You are washer means somebody saying that this person you are talking to is the washer. So let's read this whole thing. Such a computer. So now we are saying that computer can tell, right? The computer can tell your washers and dryers something. So note, the moment you put apostrophe, that means we are talking about now something which belongs to these people, right? Washers, dryers, right? So are we talking about some sort of a possession? Such a computer can tell your washers and dryers what are perfect. So we're talking about the people, not something which belongs to them. So let's look here. So this is question number 10. A goes out because this was giving us apostrophe. Tell your washer and dryer. So parallel also and the correct form, your washer. Tell you are washer, we have already discussed. This would mean that, so these two cannot be combined. When you say you can tell some person, right? And you are washer means somebody saying that you are that person. You are washers. And also see you and then we have plural forms here. That also is not working. Here we are saying who these washer or dryer belong to, you. So this is perfect. Let's look at the last question. We have semicolon, dash, comma, right? Again, testing us for syntax. So this becomes very easy once we see this, right? What is the structure? While the battle of man against the machine rages on, the questions will persist. Okay, so here we have the structure. While X happens, this happens, right? So the first part, while the battle against machine rages on, right? So this is against machine. The questions will persist. The first question will continue to persist. So let's see which option gives us this. The first one has a full stop. When do we use full stop? By now you should be clear. We use full stop when the first part is complete. Is this complete? Ask yourself. While the battle of a man against machine rages on, while this happens, then what, right? So we are asking after this what? So this cannot be. So we cannot use full stop here because the first part is not complete. Same goes for this because semicolon and full stop both are used when we are separating two complete parts, right? Complete independent. Here it gives us a dash, this gives us comma. As we have seen, we want while X, comma, Y. That is the structure. That takes us directly to D. C goes out. D is our answer. So, these were the questions in the first part. I hope you have got clarity. In case you still have any doubt, reach out to the teacher and you'll be helped. So all the best for your preparation. Ending the session now.